Hello, you're watching TVP World Talks. I'm Jan Szrawiński. Czech voters seem disillusioned with the current government of Petr Fiala and, based on the latest polls, appear ready to pivot towards the populist ANO movement of Andrej Babiš. Yet if this happens, Prague's support for Ukraine is expected to wane, as Babis has shown his reluctance to keep his predecessor's highly praised ammunition initiative intact. Should we expect Viktor Orbán and Robert Fico to gain another ally in Central Europe? And would this leave Poland isolated among its neighbors? Joining us here today is Filip Nerad, analyst and director of communications at GLOBSEC Policy Institute. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Good morning from Prague.
So first of all, let's take a look at the latest polls. How certain can we be that indeed Andrej Babiš is going to take over following the upcoming elections?
It seems to be totally certain that he and his party will win this election. The big question is if he will have allies or enough allies or coalition partners to build a new government, or if there will be a repeating of the situation from the last elections, that the rest of, let's call it a democratic bloc or the pro-Western bloc of the five parties were able to build the government, even though Andrej Babiš won the election.
But this disillusionment of the current government doesn't actually come out of nowhere. Would you agree that the Fiala government has essentially not been able to master anything apart from foreign policy? There are many commentators saying that it has been a failure, and the only exception in this regard has been the support for Ukraine, which has been excellent. But domestic policy, they say, has not been successful enough to keep the voters engaged.
No, I wouldn't agree with this. They managed a lot, but they were not able to explain it to their voters, to the people, why they are doing. They did very necessary pension reform, but they can't explain why it was so necessary to do it. And of course, this pension reform has certain effects on the people. So ANO party and other oppositions party took it and pointed on the government that they are Libyan people to stay longer working, that they are taking their money, and so on and so forth. So I would say current government were not good in explaining their steps, and of course there were a lot of external dimensions or the external effects, as I would call it. I mean, of course, energy crisis linked with the Russian invasion on Ukraine. So everything got more and more expensive, and that has also effect on people's wallets. And opposition were more able to tell the people, look, due to this government, everything is more and more expensive. You have to pay more. You don't have enough money, and a lot of voters here on this. So I would say the big fault on this domestic front was unable of this government to explain their steps, what's happening, and why a lot of these unpopular steps were so necessary.
But this is a very interesting issue. In one of its articles, the Center for European Policy Analysis said that Czech governments have traditionally been, and I quote, masters of self-inflicted recessions. In fact, they say that these economic woes have been quite independent of the overall cycle, that they appeared because of the incompetence of many governments in the Czech Republic and not because of any extraneous factors that were there, such as, for example, the energy crisis and so on. Do you think that the government could have done more to improve the economic position of the country and its citizens?
Of course, every government can do more, but it was originally a five-member coalition, then in the end, four-member coalition, and it's all the time very difficult to find a compromise to come with a kind of decision. So a lot of decisions and a lot of government steps were compromise of compromises, and in the end, the decisions were, let's say, mild, not decisive enough. Definitely can be done more. The deficit of the budget, which were promised to the voters, also can be reduced more. But as I said, there must be hard compromises done, and they were done. And the result is the current polls.
The result is also that Andrej Babiš, a populist often accused of being outright pro-Russian, is likely to take power. Where would you position Mr. Babiš in relation to other populist leaders in Europe and his stance towards Russia? For example, in comparison with the likes of Robert Fico or Viktor Orbán?
Well, I wouldn't call him pro-Russian. He's a nationalist politician, so he stressed the national interest of Czech Republic on the first place. I would say the Czech Republic on the first place, and so but he isn't pro-Russian in the way that he would be meeting Vladimir or so. So he's a pro-European, pro-transatlantic, definitely. But he's a harsh critic of the current state of European Union. He is a supporter of, let's say, more to return more competence to the national states. And as you said at the beginning, he's not a big fan of supporting Ukraine. He already announced that if he becomes a prime minister, his party will build a new government, that the Czech Republic will stop sending weapons to Ukraine. They will stop the Czech munition initiative. So in this way, he might behave something like Robert Fico, who also doesn't support Ukraine, is very critical against Ukraine, also against European Union. But in the end, he is not so pro-Russian in the way that he would collaborate with the regime. Robert Fico also supported in the end a lot of sanctions, a lot of steps of European Union against Moscow and his regime. So I would say Andrej Babiš could behave almost the same like Robert Fico. So defending Czech national interest, criticism, a lot of European steps, but in the end supporting some of them. And he definitely doesn't want to leave European Union. He doesn't want to leave NATO. He wants to have Czech Republic in the European and in the Western structures, but on the other hand, he's very critical, vocal critics against a lot of things happening in current Europe.
So Robert Fico was actually the only leader to stand together with Vladimir Putin during the parade last May. I mean, even Viktor Orbán didn't actually go to Moscow at that point. But speaking of the ammunition initiative, what argument does Andrej Babiš actually give when he talks about withdrawing the Czech Republic from this program? Is it on economic grounds, or is it more on trying to appeal to the anti-war portion of society, saying this is not our war, we're not going to become involved, this is too risky, we don't want any escalation, and so forth? How is he trying to justify this?
Yeah, I would say there are both elements of it. First, he argues already long time that the conflict in Ukraine must be solved by the diplomatic means, so by no sending weapons and ammunition to Ukrainians. It's one part. And of course, he would like to use the money that are spent on Ukraine more for the domestic reasons and projects. So, as he called it, for our own people, not to supporting Ukraine's. So, but he already for a long time repeats that the war in the Ukraine must end. It must be solved by diplomatic means and not by sending more and more weapons, and even no by sending soldiers to Ukraine.
Isn't he likely to find himself out of tune and out of sync with what's going on? I mean, we're seeing Donald Trump even realizing that, diplomatic means, it sounds great on paper, but Vladimir Putin essentially derailing every single effort, refusing to meet with President Zelensky. It makes it very difficult for diplomacy to go ahead if one of the parties, meaning Russia, simply doesn't want to take part in it in any meaningful sense.
Yeah, it's very confusing for Andrej Babiš and his party and his voters, because they are on one hand big admirers of Donald Trump. Babiš, imagine himself like, let's say, Czech Donald Trump. So on one hand, he supports this, but on the other hand, large part of his voters and the voters he tried to get on board before the elections are the supporters of peace and not supporters of help to Ukraine. So he tried to balance all these views and. So it's a confusing and for him, and I think he waits and hopes that the conflict will be solved very quickly, so he doesn't take any decisive position to it after he becomes prime minister, if he becomes a new prime minister.
But now that we've mentioned Slovakia, do you think that the approach to the arms industry and trade with Ukraine is going to be as pragmatic as in Slovakia's case? After all, Slovakia isn't helping Ukraine, but its industry is not precluded from sending any weapons there, making weapons sales. And in fact, the Czech Republic does have a substantial defense industry which could still profit from this. Do you think Andrej Babiš would take a similar route, saying we're not going to be sending weapons for free, not going to be coordinating, bringing in this ammunition from all corners of the world to help Kiev, but when it comes to weapons sales, we're open to cooperation still?
Yeah, I can clearly imagine this scenario. Yeah, that's something that might happen. The same as in Slovakia, so that the government officially won't support Ukraine by sending any weapons, but will give to Czech ammunition companies totally free hand to do it and to help them on the economic basis. So yeah, I think that's a very probable scenario that might happen also in the Czech Republic.
So the pragmatic approach. We have half a minute left. Do you think Poland is going to be in trouble if all countries are going to change their stance on Ukraine, like Hungary, Slovakia, and then Czech Republic, being left alone?
Yeah, I think that if this scenario happens, so we four will become we 1+3. So Poland on one side and the Czech Republic, Slovakia and Hungary on the other.
So difficult times ahead for the Visegrad group, possibly. For the time being, Filip Nerad was our guest today here on TVP World. Thank you very much for joining us and for sharing your insight.
Thank you.
And I'm Jonasz Rewiński. You're watching TVP World. Please stay with us for more latest news, updates and commentary.